wanted to be here, and why he's here, and what he built up. I really need your attention now. Please come in front of the stage. Please make sure that this is a value half an hour. We have approximately half an hour, 30 minutes of a talk, and he's open to answer any questions. So if there's anything that comes back to your mind and you want to ask him anything that comes to your mind, we can do that right after the talk. So please welcome on stage Bas van Abel, the founder of Fairphone.
Okay, yes, wow. Thanks for the introduction. That's quite an introduction. And I owe it to you to tell the Leipzig connection now, I guess. So what is special about Leipzig, I'm really happy to be here. And also 10 years ago, when we started the company, we started through crowdfunding. And the crazy thing is that we started the crowdfunding without knowing who would buy the phone. And when we started the crowdfunding, just, I think, 2 days after the crowdfunding, we already noticed that more than half of the phones were being sold in Germany. I have no idea why, but it just happened. And then we looked at the cities, and I can tell you that of the 25,000 people that bought that phone that didn't exist at that moment, only Berlin topped you guys. But I was also talking to Johannes about it. If you look per capita, at that time, I think Leipzig had the most Fairphones, the highest Fairphone penetration, you might say, of the world. And that really says something, because you guys supported the company to really get to the point where we are now. And that has been 10 years ago, so I'm super happy to be here on stage now. So just as a start, is there anyone here who has a Fairphone? Maybe just to see how. Oh, there's someone. Oh wow. Okay, thanks guys. I hope there's not someone here who actually bought that first phone, because that was. Oh, you did. Okay, that wasn't the greatest of phone, but you made it possible. I always say to people, if you first want to buy this stuff. You get a double whammy, because you get the shit product, but you make it possible to get a better one for other people. But anyway, thanks for that. Yeah, I need my clicker, right? Where do I have that? Okay. There we go. Yeah, so a while back, yeah, just sit back and relax, take a chair, have a beer. A while back, my son came to me. We were going on holiday, so you can imagine the whole car was packed. Everybody put the stuff in there. My son came to me, crying, and he had a Nintendo DS in his hand. It was broken. And I can tell you, and I think there's parents here in the audience that know how kids are fond of their computers. I can tell you that Nintendo DS at the time was the love of his life. And I was pretty happy with it too, because it would keep him busy during that whole trip. So you can imagine that was kind of a stressful situation for the both of us. But I have an engineering background. So I said, Bo, listen, don't worry, Daddy will fix it. So I took my screwdriver and the Nintendo. I started screwing and screwing and screwing. And at a certain point, the metal dust came out of the screw holes. And I don't know if any engineers here around you, but if the metal dust comes out of the screw holes, you know you screwed up the screws. And if you screw up the screws, well, you're screwed, because there's no way to be able to open up that Nintendo anymore. And I had to find out the hard way that Nintendo uses special screws for me not to open up their device. And that really pissed me off. I took the Nintendo, threw it against the wall, Bo was crying in the corner, and I thought, why the hell does Nintendo not want me to open up a device that I own? And my motto in life is, if you can't open it, you don't own it. And life is getting shittier and shittier, I can tell you, for somebody who's a nerd and likes to open up stuff. I don't know if you've looked at phones nowadays. Is there anyone here, and people with Fairphones are not allowed to raise their hands. Is there anyone here who recently has been able to change the battery? Oh, that's at least like 2 or 3 people in the audience. I thought it was a tech festival. There's no engineers here, people who know that. Okay, so let me ask you then a step further. Is there anyone here who actually was able to repair something in the phone? Ah, you repaired the screen? Nothing, okay, something small. Okay. Well, as you know, it was the battery. Okay, well, that's already quite difficult because there's this thing that we're suffering from, and I would like to call it smartphone anorexia. And it is a problem because the thinner smartphones get, the harder it becomes to replace a battery because everything is glued to the inside. Well, you know, you're nodding, and you had to probably get that whole thing out. So same with the screens. I don't know if the people, that probably kind of gives away your age, but back in the days when you had these small Nokias, you were able to actually replace parts. It's impossible now. It gets thinner and thinner, and all the technology is in that little box, and you can't replace it. And if you replace it, it becomes very, very expensive. So the result of that is that people use their phone for an average of 2 to 3 years. And that's a huge shame, because that can be much longer. But you know the feeling, right? You have your phone, and you crack the screen, the battery is going down already, and then the operator comes, and they offer you a new phone with a new contract, and you think, yes, let's take that new phone, because it's way, way too expensive to repair my old phone. You toss it in the drawer with the rest of the phones, with the result that only 15% of the phones get recycled. There are more phones than people on the world at the moment. And that's a waste. And the solution to that is very, very simple. The longer you use your phone, the better. Let's do a very simple calculation. If you use the phone twice as long, you only need to produce half the amount of phones, and you have half the amount of electronic waste, the biggest growing waste stream that we have nowadays. So that's why at Fairphone we make repairable phones. You can replace parts, you can change the battery. If something breaks, you order it online, you take your screwdriver, you take the screen out, and you pop in a new screen. Super simple. We offer 5-year warranty on the phone because we want to make it as easy as possible for you to keep holding on to that phone as long as possible, because that's the right thing to do. But the problem is the whole industry, they change components like clockwork. Every 1-2 years, they change a new component, and how do you fight against something as big as that industry? Well, I write letters. And in 2011, I wrote a letter to Frans Timmermans, who was at the European Commission, the commissioner at the European Commission at the time. And I wrote to him, please put phones into the directive that forces companies to make electronic products repairable in the design. And to my surprise, I got a response. And I was very happy about that. And I got really surprised, and this is 2 weeks ago, that the EU extends requirements to smartphones. That means that all smartphone manufacturers now need to have also replaceable batteries in their phones. I wouldn't say it was because of my letter only, but I was pretty proud of that fact that actually helped something. But the great thing is, and that really made me smile, is that now I got the news that Nokia is taking Fairphone heads-on on repairability, because obviously Nokia needs to make repairable phones because they have to. And they already started marketing that. So why did this put a big smile on my face? Because this has been the plan from the start. If you look at how we look at change at Fairphone, we say we want to create awareness, send letters, campaign, and then the next step is to show that there is an example, that you can change, that you can do things differently, a repairable phone, for example. And then the last step is to drag all these other companies, or to inspire them, whatever you can do, to also join that movement that you created. And Fairphone has campaigning in the DNA. In 2011, we were thinking about setting up a campaign on how to set up a campaign to raise awareness on the social and environmental issues in making smartphones. It's a hell of a job as you just think about it, because where do you start? A phone is not a banana, I can tell you. There's more than 1,200 components in a phone, made by thousands of factories around the world, who have suppliers of those factories. And you basically talk about the whole world. And there's more than 90 minerals that go into a phone, that all come from the ground somewhere around the world. So where do you start? And then I thought, I'm a designer, so I have one big fascination, and it is that we are able to make something as complex as a smartphone by just digging into the ground, getting stones out of it, working together in a magical economic system, and I make something that we would never be able to make as an individual. We would even never be able to understand the complexity of most of the products that we have around us. My microphone, the tablet you're holding there, even maybe these tables. They're all just taken from the ground, and by working together, magically, we are able to make these products, which we would never be able to do alone. But we've all alienated from the system behind it. What connects us with these products? Who made them? Where do they come from? Where do they end up if we don't use them anymore? So that's when we said, you know what? Why don't we make our own phone? And we make that our campaign. We start from the beginning, we go to the mine, and we take it from there, because we know everything just comes from the ground. And step by step, we take people along, and we show what the world looks like through the eyes of a phone. We show that things can be done differently, and then we take the industry with us to improve. And we call it Fairphone, and we set up the company with the sole purpose to improve the whole industry. So what does the world look like through the eyes of a phone? I'll just quickly walk you through the world through the eyes of the phone. This is a stone I'm holding I took from a mine in Congo back in 2010-11. And this mineral is being used for batteries. It's cobalt. I don't know if you know it, but most of the cobalt world supply is in Congo, right? 40 to 70%, people say. And cobalt is being used for our energy transition. We need so much cobalt for all our Teslas, all our electric vehicles, all our infrastructure, that we need to get us from the ground. And this stuff is mined in mines like this, where guys go 30 meter, 60 meter deep under the ground to get these stones out of the ground so that we can drive our electric vehicle, our Teslas, and have our newest shiny phones. And on top of that, there's more than 10,000 kids working in these mines still to make these products. And there's another problem going on in Congo. In the last 10, 15 years, millions of people have died in conflicts related to the mining of these minerals. And then these minerals, they end up in factories where people work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, because they don't make a living wage. They get a minimum wage, and they have to make so much overtime so that they can actually have a normal pay. And then when we don't use our phones anymore, I was in Ghana 2-3 weeks ago, I took these pictures. Most of our stuff, if we don't keep it in our drawer, ends up somewhere in a country where it's very difficult to recycle this stuff again. A battery that's glued to the inside of the phone ends up somewhere in the ground because they burn it to get the minerals out. And then you look at the system, and you look at the industry, and I was in Barcelona, and you walk around, they have bendable displays, they have phones with 10, 12 cameras. And you ask yourself, how can I change such a big system? And what really helps me is a quote from Dalai Lama. If you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito in the room. And it helps me because it really shows how little, how small you can be to still have an impact. And that's what we wanted to do with Fairphone. So I took that stone, and we want to set up a company, obviously. I took that stone, I took from the mine, I went to KPN, it's the biggest operator in Holland. I put it on the table, the full board was sitting there, and I said, guys, this stone, that will become a Fairphone. And if you sign a contract of 1,000 phones, you will become launching partner. What do you think about it? And the whole room went silent, and they looked at me, and I thought, they're going to kick me out like the rest of them did, and they're going to tell me I'm crazy. But then one guy stood up, and he said, wow, I just read a book about Congo, and we need to do something about this. And the magical thing happened. 2 weeks later, KPN signed a contract where they bought 1,000 non-existing phones from a company that didn't exist, from a guy that never made a phone before. And they put it in the media. They said, because they wanted to be proud, they said, and they probably thought it's never going to happen anyway, but they said, well, we're going to buy it for a maximum of 450 euros because we didn't have a price, because the phone didn't exist. But once they put it in the media, everybody thought like, wow, wait a minute, if KPN just bought 1,000 Fairphones, that must be real, right? So that was the time for us to start our crowdfunding. I just told you again, we did our crowdfunding, and what happened is that within 2-3 months, 25,000 people, of which more than half of them German, and a big part of that from Leipzig, bought that non-existing phone. It was so crazy that the non-existing phones were being sold on eBay for double the price. And the crazy thing about that is that because it was non-existing, it was just a button on the website that said, pay now, and you will probably get your phone within now and half a year. So this was a statement for people that really wanted change. And that is great. We had 7.5 million on our bank account, and we had no idea what we were doing, but we were lifting off. And I slept like a baby, I can tell you. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. And I literally did. My partner at the time, she was looking at me. I was sobbing in bed. I was going, you know, I just don't know. I have to transfer. She asked me, like, Bas, what's going on, man? I said, well, I have to transfer a couple of million to a Chinese factory. Once I transfer it, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm an artist, I'm a designer, I'm a maker, but I've never set up a company. I didn't even have people working for me. So how can I, and how the hell can I set up that company? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to pay back everybody the money, and then, you know, we'll just show that somebody wants this, so somebody will start doing it. And then she just looked at me and she said, Bas, you pussy. These people, they didn't buy that phone from you. This is the biggest chance to make impact in your life, and you are going to take it. And nothing can go wrong. So I got my family's backing, so that was fine. And I'm really happy they did, because after 1.5 years, we had 40 people working at Fairphone. We sold over 60,000 phones. We had 16 million euro turnover, and we were the fastest growing technology startup in Europe. And what is even greater, that little mosquito I was talking about, that little mosquito that started something super naive, in 2016, we were already probably the smallest consumer electronics company in the world. We were the greenest consumer electronics company in the world, according to Greenpeace. Yeah. So just fast forward a bit. We're now a company that sold over 500,000 phones. We're a profitable company, so we're showing that making impact and campaigning and having that DNA to change can go hand in hand with making money. We also have more than 150 people working at Fairphone all over the world, but what I'm most proud of is the projects that we're doing along the supply chain. And we work in 4 areas. The supply chain is quite complex, and the first area is on materials. All the plastics in the phone are 100% recycled plastics. We're the first ones to use fair trade gold in our phones. We just set up a Fair Cobalt Alliance together with Google and Tesla. We got them in to join us in Congo to improve the working conditions in the mines there. We're the first ones to have a living wage program in the factories where we pay a living wage instead of a minimum wage in the consumer electronics industry. And we take back, of course we do also recycling, we take back more phones than we put into the system. But I have to tell you, recycling still is plainly stupid when you look at the phone business and electronics. What you do, you toss it in the oven, you burn it, the minerals come out, and you use those minerals again. So you want to make sure that people use that phone as long as possible. And that's what I said as well before. But the problem with that, and that is with companies nowadays, and that's more on a philosophical level, is that with everything you're creating, you're also destroying. We as a phone company, and that's the paradox, that's our dilemma, we make money by selling phones, and we take from the earth by selling phones. And I love those dilemmas. And when people say sustainability has to be about win-win, well, fuck it. Sustainability is about dilemmas and then embracing them. And how we embrace them is that, and I don't know if you know about key performance indicators, but how we measure the success of the company is say, we want to sell as many phones as possible, but we also want to make sure people hold on to their phone as long as possible. And I can tell you this is a bomb in the head of a salesperson, because at Fairphone, salespeople, they cannot sell to the people that they already sold the phone to. They're not allowed to because they need to make people use that phone as long as possible. And the great thing about that is that it also drives you to disconnect your business model from the use of resources. And I want to show you a quick video before I go over to my end on what we just launched in order to align our business model with using less resources. And there is sound in this.
Easy, omdat je alleen uit 4 abonnementen moet kiezen. En klaar.
Nadat je hebt aangemeld, krijg je de nieuwste Fairphone 4 met beschermende accessoires erbovenop. Daarna nog even je huidige simkaarten in en je bent good to go. Oh, en vergeet de zorgeloze reparatieservice niet.
Luister, het zou niet Fairphone Easy heten als we niet ook gratis reparaties aanbieden. Is er iets kapot gegaan? Wij zorgen voor een vervangende telefoon binnen 48 uur. Je zult nauwelijks een appje missen. Na afloop van je abonnementsperiode kan je abonnement gewoon door laten lopen of opzeggen of wijzigen. Stuur je Fairphone dan terug naar ons. Wij zorgen ervoor dat deze opnieuw wordt gebruikt of dat de onderdelen worden gerecycled.
Fairphone Easy is dé ultieme vorm van wat wij altijd zeggen, changes in your hands. Want wanneer je een abonnement neemt, krijg je veel meer in your hands dan alleen een smartphone. Je zet echt verandering in gang. Want je kiest voor een smartphone die gemaakt is met eerlijke en verantwoorde materialen, betere arbeidsomstandigheden en je draagt bij aan een meer circulaire economie. Dus het zou geweldig zijn als jij ons helpt te laten zien dat de manier waarop we producten maken en gebruiken echt anders kan.
So, I'd like to end with something something I see very highly once said, and that is Gus Pat. Gus Pat, he dedicated his whole life into looking at how to solve the biggest sustainability problems, the biggest environmental problems in the world. He advises like the US government and big governments on how to solve these, and he is a researcher. And he said, I always thought that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, global warming, and that kind of stuff. But after having dealt with that for so many years, I've come to the conclusion that the top environmental problems are not that, but the selfishness, greed, and apathy. And in order to change that, we don't need new legislation only. We don't need more innovations only. We need a cultural transition. And I believe a really, really important element of that transition is to re-establish a healthy relationship with the products we use. Because the most sustainable phone is the phone you already have. Thank you very much.
Please stay with us for a second because
I'm here for some questions. As well.
Yes, once you're here, we want to use the opportunity, and we do have a microphone. Philip down here has a microphone, so if there's any question popping up into your head, if you want to ask about sustainability, technology, design, product life cycles, resources, whatever, then now is the opportunity to talk to Bas. Please.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Was very interesting and also motivating. My question is, what is the single problem, the biggest problem you have faced, and what is the way you have solved it? So the biggest single problem on your journey to the sustainable phone.
Yeah, I'm very straightforward about that. That's the economic system itself. It will, everything you do. And that's also why, for example, that Fairphone Easy is such an important program, not only for customers. You know, that's one side of the story. But the biggest problem as a company is that it will always push you towards cutting costs at certain points, right? And the easy thing to cut costs in is, you know, stuff like, for example, like if I sell you a phone, at the moment I've sold you a phone, you become a cost center to me. I don't want you to come back. Actually, I want to sell a new phone to you because that's the only way that I, as a company, can make money. If you turn that around and you pay me a monthly fee, I don't want you to get a new phone because that will cost me something. So you totally reverse that kind of thinking. So I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing is how do you disconnect your business model from the use of resources? And I'm super confident that that is possible. Because people say, yeah, but what about the factories? Well, factories can go into remanufacturing. Factories will have work, they just use components. If you design phones in a way that you can reuse modules, you can reuse screens, you can reuse whatever you design in that product, you will have factories still running around and doing their jobs. So I believe that kind of that growth, buy more, that is the biggest problem that we're facing. And that's not just an industry problem, it's also a consumer problem. And it's also a legislation problem. And I believe consumers should buy less stuff, companies make less stuff, and the government should facilitate that companies and consumers to do that.
I have a little story to share at that moment. If you have any other questions, please feel free to raise your hands. I remember being at an event in Berlin, Tech Open Air. That was the time when you had to go to Berlin for cool startup events. And I know that Fairphone was there, and they had a stand and they had a little talk, and I was fascinated about it. And I asked the guy questions, and he was the sales guy, and I was asking him, how can I get a phone? And I have a little scratch on whatever. I wasn't happy with my current phone. And the guy just said, yeah, I mean, just keep it. I mean, why do you want a new phone? And I was like, no, I just like the product and I want to change. And the guy literally didn't want me to buy a Fairphone, which is totally the dilemma. That's
great to hear.
And that was the moment where I became a fan, because I mean, the company paid money for that stand, but you do have values that you, even in this process of selling something, that the values are higher than, I don't know how you run a company that way.
You also need your shareholders to be aligned with that. So I don't know if there's companies here, people looking for investment, but it's super important to have investors that also buy into these kind of values. And maybe it's a bit of a big kind of answer, and practically you run into all kinds of shit. Right? I had to fly gold myself to the factories to be able to implement fair trade gold in a plane. You can imagine. It's not very sustainable in terms of business. So at a certain point, it was to bypass the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So we need to get the gold through the Shanghai Gold Exchange. First thing I did when I was in Congo, when we set up the campaign, I had to bribe the Minister of Communication for $250 to be able to film in the mines where we wanted to tell the story. And you're setting up a company called Fairphone, and the first big expense you have is basically bribing a minister of a country of 80 million people. So you will run into all these things. And I think one of the things that I always remember is once you're transparent about it and are willing to put that vulnerability and also open to critique around that, once you're willing to do that, it also saves you to have to hide everything to show that everything is going better than actually is. So I think just being open about also the things that you can't do is really important.
Yeah. It's funny because we do have another talk tomorrow about sustainability, about a company that started in Dresden and now it's moved to Leipzig. It's about chocolate, and they are doing great stuff with selling chocolate, and at the same time they run into like growth problems. That's for the keynote tomorrow, so that's a very similar thing to be looking forward. John, again.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your speech. It was really amazing. My question is, with all the technological advances that you have, how much power do you have as Fairphone over software advances? For example, with Android phones and whatnot, like with all the updates and whatnot, that's something that basically over the course of a couple of years, maybe months even, would make the software obsolete. So do you have power over them to basically force them to be able to update the Fairphone to the newest software?
The very short answer is no. You don't have power over Qualcomm and Google and these guys. You just put your fingers crossed and hope that they'll be willing to help you. But what you do have power over is embracing open source communities, for example, to support you on keeping the software alive. Is investing also in your own commitments to software. For example, Fairphone 2 has, unfortunately we finished the software upgrades recently, but we were able to support that phone for 7 years, of which 5 years was all done in-house. So it's a choice. So a lot of companies choose not to put that support in there, and then you get back to that first question, why? Because it just costs them money. And then what do companies do when they get it, when it becomes difficult or the shareholders want their money? They cut costs. And that's exactly where most of the costs are cut. And that is so it's really a choice. What isn't a choice is your supply chain. And that's the reason why Fairphone needed to grow and still needs to grow. If there's component shortages, the first to jump on all these components are Apple, Samsung, all these big guys, and we're always last in line. And what really is important that we use also our PR position and our reach to increase that position when the shit hits the fan. And now we actually have really good relationship with the chipset manufacturers and Google, where they give us kind of special treatment. But that took 10 years.
We do have time for one last question. So if you are hesitating, that's now the moment to raise your hand. I have one question to in between. Do you have data about your target group, about the people that are using the phone that you're addressing? Do you have any information from the inside that or is it?
Yeah, we have geo. We know what phones are being sold, but I don't know the recent data, and because of data privacy, we can't also go really deep into the demographics of the data. But obviously, with through Facebook and all these social media, you are able to get some of the data. But I don't know the recent one, but I know that in terms of mix of gender balance, it's like 50-50. And like I said, most of the phones are still sold in Germany. I think 40-50%. Then France, and then probably UK, and then Netherlands, which is weird. And maybe somebody you can think about, because maybe somebody can tell me why you think that Fairphone went so well in Germany. Because people ask me, but I always say, well, they're very critical towards what they consume, but I don't know. Right? Maybe so why Leipzig, for example? I don't know.
Maybe that's something for
beer. If somebody has an idea, please tell me. I'd love to hear.
Let's see that out. Okay, one last question. Go.
when you started it, it's like beginning just with an idea, and then suddenly, yeah, when you started it, then there's a lot of tasks coming. Yeah, okay, production and design and so on and on. Did you create a method to manage all this stuff without feeling totally overwhelmed with all the tasks? And
yeah, it's a very good question. No, I didn't, and I ended my wife ended up bringing me to the crisis center of the mental health clinic at a certain point because of it. So it's like, you know, you lift off that plane, you're flying it, you're still building it, and you don't know how to fly, and that machine just goes on, and then at a certain point you can't solve problems with your own bank account anymore. So our problem become like a couple of million at a certain point, and I was just looking at it, I thought, like, how the hell am I going to solve that? I got panic attacks and then got into this really bad place. Started writing, you know, emails to Richard Branson and people like that because we needed money really quick because the company was growing too fast, and I was really on the point like, why does this happening? And I was really sad about the fact that the company would actually be able to fail based on something as stupid as money. But from that moment on, I also turned that around and said, I need to be on top of that money. I need to understand how that works. I want to change that system. And I've always been like kind of averse to the whole idea of money, and it's not important. And I can tell you, I've set up a new company. I'm CFO at that company because I want to be on top of that money and know how things are going there. And not because I want, you know, that the financials are my heart, but I know if you do that well, and you plan well, you might be able to prevent yourself also from hitting the wall. Because running a company without money is you know, if your runway is like 2-3 months, because when you're out of money and your monthly costs are 250,000 euros, and there's more than 100 people working in your company, you can't just solve that by asking your daddy, right? So, I mean, most people can't.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you very much, Bas van Abel.